we had a awesome therapist that's going to join us today to answer all these questions that we had. Because we got a lot of questions in the DM that we've received and that I'm just going to throw to you. So introduce yourself, let people know who you are, how they can find you, where you're located, and what's your specialty.
Definitely. My name is ALELIA Watson. I go by Leah for short. My Instagram handle is Leah the Therapist. I've been in private practice for about 3 years, practicing altogether for 8. I have accept clients in Texas and Louisiana. My specialty is minority women's issues, meaning depression, anxiety, work to life balance, relationship stress, co-parenting stress,
Yeah.
family stress. I accept a lot of insurances as well. I am strictly virtual, so we meet online, which I found for a lot of clients that's more convenient.
Mm-hmm.
My website is Liaison Counseling Services, but again, you can find everything you need on Instagram, and hopefully y'all can get some good information from us today.
I know. I think this is such a good topic for us to get into. So let's just jump into it about
Let's.
co-parenting. What is like? Okay, you were in a relationship, or maybe you weren't in a relationship. Hey, you don't have
Wait,
to
I
give
guess
me
I
a.
guess I forgot one thing I should say. I'm a mom, so I am giving co-parenting advice from like a professional but also a personal point of view. So like outside of all those other good things, I'm a mom, so I'm an expert in this conversation from another good aspect as well.
Yeah, and that's important too, because you like, look, I get it, right? I'm here, I'm in it.
Exactly.
So like I said, you may or may not be in a relationship. You may have whatever. However, you are a parent now. So now that you are a parent and you are
Yes.
co-parenting, what is the best way to go
hmm
about co-parenting? Like, what's the best method?
I know for me that one thing started using early on personally, and that I recommend to a lot of my clients is identifying a schedule and communicating that, because that can prevent from a lot of conflicts, misunderstanding, and chaos. So I think like the use of a schedule for the child, a routine for the child, so that we can keep that the same at each household. And then again, just being in an understanding of who gets the child on what days, who's responsible for what things, even if that includes finances, education, medical. So just getting a firm understanding of everybody's role and expectations.
Yeah. So, how do you go about communicating that? Let's say, like you said, that's a lot of things that you have to work out to say, okay, what days do you want? Okay, I'm gonna get these days,
Mhm.
or I want these holidays, I want this birthday, or however it may go. How is the best way of like having that effective communication where the other party doesn't feel like you're kind of like telling them what to do, or
Mhm.
being so forceful or direct? What's the best way of communicating?
Well, I think for me, I have the background of like I'm a planner, I'm an organizer already. So whenever I presented it to my son's father, there wasn't much opposition. But I think that the start always starts with, what days are you not able to keep him? What days or what hours of work for you? So we start off with that as a preliminary of what works for each of us, starting off by like who can or cannot cover certain things. Like for me being an entrepreneur, there are certain days that like I usually typically work later, so therefore I would like for him to get him. For him, he works like a 9 to 5, so therefore some of the day stuff like medical and things like that I handle. I also have more background in medical, so therefore I handle that as well. Sporting events, choosing what's the right camp and all that, he's more versed in that, so he handles that. So we usually try to play off of each other's strengths. And again, I think the key thing is communication and making sure, like you said, not like it's I'm forcing this on you. It's going to be, what is a mutual schedule that works for both of us and also overall benefits the child and the child's schedule.
Yeah. What about if you're not sure the other your partner's strengths? What if it was
Hmm.
something that was short? It wasn't like a long term where you had an opportunity to kind of really get to know the partner or even to understand their
Mhm.
strengths or weaknesses. How do you go about, or what do you recommend going about trying to decide who will be best suited for what?
Maybe asking them, what is your preference of what you would like to do, or what do you feel more comfortable doing? Because again, a lot of times with parenting, we're both new to this. In some cases we're not. So if we're new to this, I might not actually know my strengths. So it might be more of, what do you feel more comfortable doing? What do you have the support to be able to carry out and follow through with and do?
Yeah, that's a good
Like, you know,
point.
for somebody, it might be something as simple as like, hey, I'm a night owl. So maybe you can do some more of the night shifts because the baby wakes up more. Or, hey, I'm a morning person. In the morning, can you maybe make sure breakfast is ready? And since I'm a night owl, I'll do all the cleaning in the afternoon because I can handle that. So it might just be as simple as, not necessarily a strength, but what do you feel most comfortable doing?
Yeah, yeah, I like that. Now, what if you have a partner that is not as receptive to trying to co-parent? They may be volatile, or high conflict person, and make it just really difficult to come up with a plan. How do you recommend handling those situations?
At that point, I know for me, my father always told me, like early on, whenever I first got pregnant, like, prepare to do things alone. Like, you know, a lot of times we have these high expectations for people that they might not be ready to fulfill or even able to meet. So therefore, the only thing that you can control in these situations is yourself and your expectations of them. So this might be a time for you to sit and reevaluate, like, okay, I see that they don't want to do this. What am I capable of doing? What can I outsource and ask for help with from family or friends, or see what's out in the community? So therefore, focusing on your own personal strengths versus somebody else's lack, because that's going to lead to you becoming bitter and frustrated because you can't control that person and make them live up to the standards that you want them to.
Yeah. Do you recommend, and just asking, maybe even for personal experience, not necessarily coming from a therapist point of view, but maybe personal experience, do you recommend someone getting a parenting plan, or going through like the court systems to get some type of like what is it called, legitimization to say
100%.
what's
A
happening?
lot of these, before you even go to court, they offer you mediation or counseling, which I think is great, because I think a lot of times, like you mentioned earlier, a lot of people have resentments from the prior relationship that roll into co-parenting. So they need that person to help redirect them and refocus on what the ultimate goal at hand, which is caring and providing for the child. So I often, even couples that I know that are not together, I still advocate for counseling, because a lot of the things that you need in a relation, like co-parenting is a relationship, regardless of how we want to look at it. It's a minimum 18-year relationship or commitment. So therefore, we're going to need to learn how to communicate and also handle disagreements and handle conflict. Because of each of our backgrounds, we're not going to agree on everything the same things or concepts when it comes to parenting. So we need to be in an environment where we can be provided with the tools, if we don't have them, to be able to communicate and find compromise for the child.
Yeah. And like you said, I think going back on what you said, like not having those skills, right? If you, excuse me, if you didn't grow up maybe seeing, excuse me, if you didn't grow up seeing healthy relationships growing up, and how do you know kind of what of a healthy relationship looks like? So do you recommend counseling or going to therapy with the partner beforehand, or even after the child is here?
I would say yes to both, but I also think on the beforehand, there's so many community resources before we get to the extreme of like, counseling's not extreme. Before we get to counseling, like there's so many co-parenting classes, like mom classes, where you learn what to expect, you learn the different stages. And then during those times, ideally, if we're attending some of these things, these will become talking points. And some of the classes, like churches offer these, community centers, like these address some of the co-parenting issues that you have in the future. And this will give you places of where to begin communicating and seeing what's best for each of y'all.
Yeah, that's really good. Should there be boundaries though in this co-parenting relationship?
Definitely, yes. I think there should be like boundaries in everything. Like I'm huge on boundaries. Like, yes, we have boundaries so there won't be any discrepancies, like things that are unclear expectations. So yes, I definitely think that like there should be boundaries.
Yeah, what are some boundaries that we can have? Let's say to start out, starting out in this co-parent relationship.
Hmm. I would say this is going to sound like very blunt, but a lot of co-parenting gets confused with like no sexual intercourse. Like if we're not together, like, and we're only strictly co-parenting, there needs to be no like sexual things happening, because that can blur the lines of, are we in a relationship? Are we not? I'm expecting you to do more because now I think we're together, or I'm expecting to do less because now that I think that we're together. Like, I think that we need to be very clear on, we're either pursuing a relationship or we're not. And if we're not, it needs to be like no sexual interactions.
Okay, what if you want the sexual interaction though? How do you how
I
do
think
you
that
handle
needs
that?
to be a conversation. Like, are we just having sex, like no strings attached because it's comfortable and we're with each other, but we both understand that there's no relationship coming from this? Or even before that, I would say we need to get the co-parenting expectations understood before we try to add in the intimacy.
Okay, that's a
Because
good
again,
one.
I think that whenever we like naturally, if you're having sex with somebody, it causes feelings, emotions, like that adds to like a gray area.
Yeah. What now? I've had a lot of that too with some of my clients talking about discussing that, like blurring the lines of co-parenting with that. And I've also heard where sometimes the other partner will say, really not interested in the child, but interested in more of the sexual relationship with the parent. And then the parent feel obligated to perform these sexual duties or
That's why I
whatever. And
said,
then
and
we
when you throw sex in any situation, it causes blurred lines. So that's why I think like a lot of people underestimate talking about that. But that's one of the first things. If we're not going to be together and we're trying to strictly co-parent, there needs to be no sex.
yeah.
Like, I think
Okay.
it should be a very clear cut. So again, it won't hinder the co-parenting relationship because we still have lingering feelings or emotions from the intimate relationship.
Yeah. What about when you have one of the parents that may try to say, okay, well, when you get the child, these are things that you can and cannot do with the child. Is that a boundary for the parent that's setting it up, saying that you can't do this, this, and that? Or is that a boundary when the child goes with the other party? Let's just say the child goes with dad and is with dad for the weekend.
I don't know if I would call that a boundary. I think that that should be a mutual understanding of expectations of what does and doesn't work for the child. And that should be held in both settings. So if we've already discussed that, like we should both know that, like, hey, the kid doesn't eat sweets after this period of time, or because it's COVID, I would only like the child to be around people who were vaccinated. Like, these should be a mutually agreed upon conversation versus a, here goes, this is what you need to do, or this is what you can and can't do. It should be a mutual conversation.
Yeah. I've
Because I
also
think that's
heard.
the biggest thing with co-parenting is going to be communication, communication, communication.
And then how do you? I'm gonna come back to that communication one because what also I've also heard from some of my clients is when you are talking about, let's say the relationship didn't work out and one of the parties is kind of still wanting to be in the relationship even though it didn't work out and saying, okay, you can't have my child around any other men, or my child can't be around any other women, or however, whatever
Mm-hmm.
the roles are. How do you set boundaries as that, or saying like, hey, we're not together, I'm dating, I'm married, I'm engaged? How do you put parameters around that and having that type of relationship?
I think that's going to be very individualized because, again, given people's background, their perception might be different. Like somebody who might have been like sexually assaulted at a young age might not want their kid being around a lot of strangers because of the fact that I've had this happen to me. But then the other person's background might be like, hey, I was raised with my cousins, my aunts, everybody around it because we raised the child like as a group or a community. So it's going to be very individualized of what's appropriate. But I think that at the end of the day, the question we're going to both have to ask each other is, will this negatively impact the child? Does this put the child at harm? And if so, what are some boundaries or precautions we would like to put around that?
Okay. So, and
Because
then
that kind of begins to ask the question, like, is it me trying to control you as an individual, or am I truly concerned about the well-being of my child?
that's good. I like that question that you just said. Is it me trying to control you as an individual or the well-being of the child? I think it's a really good way to reframe your thought process. If you are unsure of, like, am I trying to control this person, or is it really about my child? Sitting asking yourself that question. Wait, does this harm my child at the end of the day? And I think that's a really good way to look at it. If that's something that you're struggling with, of trying to,
and that's something you mentally have to check in with yourself and see, like, what am I really tripping about? Like, what is really most frustrating about this situation?
Yeah. Going into co-parenting, and let's say that isn't something that you wanted to do. Like, I didn't want to co-parent. I wanted my family to be together. And let's say that's something that you're struggling with internally, of getting into this new role of being a co-parent. What are some tips that you can give to someone that didn't even really want to be in this role, but has to, accept that this is where we are? What are like 2 or 3 things that somebody can do to kind of almost like check themselves, to bring themselves, to...
That's exactly what I was going to say, like some self-healing, because a lot of the times it's frustration with yourself. What did I do wrong? Why didn't I get this life that I wanted? So I think it's going to be some healing and some taking some time. And okay, so yes, I didn't get to be the perfect family, but what does this look like for me? How can I reframe this to something that still makes me comfortable? Can I just be really good friends in order to provide a great atmosphere for my child? Like, what works best for me? But I think it's going to be a lot of times just falling back and kind of taking some time to yourself, because unfortunately things like social media, I see all these happy couples, it kind of leads to me becoming more resentful and frustrating, or it might dictate my actions. So, just taking some time to take some self-care and reevaluate yourself, your expectations, and how I can get what I want within reality.
Yeah.
Because we can say I want my family back, but that might have to be a blended family at this point, because we do know that this relationship is dissolved.
Right. Now, if you are uncomfortable with bringing up some of these things, like you say, you're struggling yourself with acceptance of co-parenting. You may also be struggling with communicating with your partner, or you may feel like your partner is not going to be receptive to some boundaries or parameters, because maybe before it was about having a sexual relationship, but you're like, you know what, I want that to end. I'm not interested in doing that anymore. I want it to be some parameters around our relationship. But you aren't that type of person to bring up anything that maybe that could bring conflict, right?
Okay.
And you're like, oh, I don't know what this person is gonna say. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I don't want to do this anymore. What ways can you recommend, or what ways can someone in that situation work on, or even try to address that with the other party, even though they are shy, afraid of the response or the reaction that they may receive?
I always tell people, like, I'm a big fan of like writing a letter, sending an email. And the reason why I advocate for that is because that gives you time to write down your thoughts, reread them, make sure they're making sense, make sure you're not being like too accusatory or sensitive. Like, I always advocate like writing out your thoughts.
I think that's an awesome idea. And even do you recommend the person send it to the individual?
I think that that's kind of situational. If this is something that is open to be repaired, if we identify that the other party will at least be receptive of the information, like, I think it's kind of very situational on if we should send it. It's kind of like, will sending it do more harm than hurt? Harm than good. Wait, I said that wrong. Yeah.
But what if the other person you feel like is narcissistic, or the buzzword right now is toxic that everybody is talking about? Is it okay to ignore that individual, or say not necessarily co-parent with that individual. Maybe you're like, you know what, you are so toxic or so harmful.
That's one thing I cannot advocate for. I do not believe in that. I don't believe it's fair, especially in our community with everything going on, to cut off the child's right to have, their parent in their life, because that can cause like trauma for them long term. Like if you truly have concerns about that, and if these toxic behavior is that you identify is directly correlating with their parenting, I would definitely say get the court systems involved so we can possibly have supervised visits, limited visits. But if these toxic behaviors are only impacting y'all's adult relationship, it's definitely not fair to make the child suffer because two adults can't be mature and communicate or handle things. So I would never advocate for like block, unless we're talking instance where like physical abuse, or again, where you feel like your child or yourself is at harm. Definitely do it. But you made me mad, we always argue, and let me block you so you can't talk to your child or see him for a week. I do not advocate for that. That builds more turmoil, more resentment, more roadblocks for future effective communication or even trust. And confusion for the child. Like sometimes we underestimate, like kids feel vibes and they're more aware of situations than we think that they are.
Yeah. Do you advocate for if negative things like trying to bash the other parent for the child?
No, because would you want the other parent to do that about you? Like, this sounds like so old school, but my dad raised me on this. Treat people how you want to be treated. Like, I'm not going to do that because I know I'm going to be pissed upset, excuse my language. I'm going to be upset. Like, if I find out that you're saying negative things to me about my child, negative things about me to my child, because a kid's mind is so moldable. So we have to be careful of what we put into it or what the things that we kind of normalize for them.
Right. So if they're going with the other parent, and the other parent, whether it's mom, whomever, right, they might go with the parent and the other parent is like, oh, your mother is this and that, blah, 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 blah. Or vice versa. The mom is maybe like, and I'm just speaking traditionally because we know it's a multitude of families, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just a mom and dad. But just using this for an example. But the mom is also saying, oh, your daddy ain't never doing nothing for you. Your daddy do this, your daddy do that. And then when the child goes with the dad, also having that negative experience because of being so moldable. So how do you handle that on either party side? Like if you're the party that's picking your child up, for, let's say, the weekend. And
I think that we would have to come to like a mutual agreement that we shouldn't do that, because ultimately the most damage is being done to the child. Because now you're trying to put me against each of my parent. Now I'm confused. Like, who do I believe? What do I do? Should I smile? Do I laugh? Do I not acknowledge it? Because I don't want my mom to think I'm a traitor. I don't want my dad to think I don't have like their back. I think that at the end of the day, all co-parenting questions come back to what's best for the child. Like, if you want to talk smack that bad, like, text me. You can tell me these things. Like, write a letter and put it in a box. Like, put it on, well, I don't really advocate for putting it on your social media, but any other place but the child is not something. The child should not be an option. And then also too, it becomes kind of like, what are you hoping to get from saying that to the child? They can't change the parent. They can't control the parent. Like, you kind of have to question yourself, like, what am I getting out of telling this child this information?
Yeah, I think it's a theme here of the conversation that we're having. It's almost like we're always continuous to say, like, check yourself when it comes to this co-parenting. Because if it is difficult, then how are you possibly engaging and being a part of that to make it difficult? Is it whatever we decide to do, as long as it's the best for the child, right? Like how, whatever you're
or how is it going to impact the child? Even if we acknowledge that if it's in a negative or a positive way, how is this going to impact the child?
Right. That whole point. So from your experience and from therapy and coming from that standpoint, from where you have any clients, like, what's the one main takeaway that you for, like I say, where you experience and when you work with your clients, what's one main thing that you really try to push that your clients get at the end of the day? Like if they don't get anything else from therapy, you want them to
communication rules the nation. That you have to learn how to communicate. And let me correct that even more. Assertively communicate your feelings, because a lot of the times just because we think we're saying words that we're communicating. And another big thing about communication, I think a lot of people miss, communication also includes active listening. You can't only just express your concerns, your issues, and expect people to be receptive. You need to be open to people might have other perspectives or other point of views. Because again, when it comes to parenting, we come from two different backgrounds. I'm bringing my mama's background, my daddy's background, his mama's background, his daddy's background. And a lot of us are new to this. So we don't even know what's the right way, even though technically there's no right way to parent. We don't know what that is or how to navigate that. So also kind of like being humble, like knowing that like you're not an expert. Like nobody can say they're a parenting expert, like, because we all out here figuring it out. We all have different kids, different stages of life. So I think assertive communication, active listening, and just like be open.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining. I think this was a whole bunch of gems that I got, from this myself. So I absolutely love this chat. Let people know again who you are. If they missed what you said in the beginning, who you are, how they can find you, what's your social, and they would contact you.
Okay. My name is ALELIA Watson. You can find me on Instagram at Leah the Therapist. I forgot earlier, my Facebook, Liaison Counseling Services. My website is www.liaisoncounselingservices. Again, I offer free consultations. I accept a lot of insurances. So if you're struggling with any of these issues that we talked about today, please feel free to reach out so I can assist you.
Awesome. Thank you again so much for joining us. We appreciate it.